What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a PO Box, and I don't think Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Yeah, man. See, we were talking about DC. I haven't been here since I was a little kid, and in Reston, Virginia, right now, and just an interesting place, interesting area. Yeah, I couldn't imagine being in the grind like a media member and trying to, be a slickster and get your way in and be the competitive, cutthroat, kill or be killed mentality that this city. I mean, this is. I used to say Vegas was like that because I grew up going there, like just a hustler, kill or be killed. I assume New York, L.A., but this is, I would think, tops it all. No.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's the center of the empire, and the District of Columbia. I don't know how many square miles that is, but a lot of people refer to just the Beltway. Okay, inside the Beltway, and even for like I would say more than 30 miles around D.C. Around Pennsylvania Avenue, you're definitely in the gravitational pull of like the Death Star. You're like within the capture range of the black hole. So I just drove through there last week, and for people that are familiar with Virginia, Virginians call Northern Virginia Yankee occupied Northern Virginia, and it's just as bad on the Maryland side, the counties on the Maryland side. In fact, I think that I'm not recently up to date on this, but something like 20 of the 25 wealthiest counties in the United States of America surround Washington, D.C. And it's because that's where the billions and billions of dollars are flowing through. So whether you work for the government officially, at some .gov or .mil agency, or you work for one of the hundreds of giant corporations that might as well have CIA, on top of their building, but instead it says, ABC XYZ Corporation, like where Ed Snowden worked. He didn't work at a building that said CIA. He worked at a building, I forget what, it's a familiar name, but he worked at a building, I've passed it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's Ed Snowden's company. It's CIA. If all the buildings around DC that were actually CIA and NSA said so, then it would be very obvious that DC was just being run by the CIA and NSA. But as it is, it's just these subcontractors. But as we've learned from all the Doge files, and I'm sure we'll get to the whole Elon Musk thing, but as we've learned from that, just not even billions, trillions of dollars just flow to all of these, shady contractors, and that money ends up in the DC area. That's why at 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning, I-95 is gridlocked with these guys heading into DC, to collect their paycheck. They live way beyond Reston where you are, but they're going to a job inside of the Beltway, and it may say, ABC Corporation on top, XYZ Corporation, but they're just deep state cutouts, because it would be too boring if the entire city just said CIA NSA. But they're all flowing in, or some .mil Pentagon cutout contractor, military industrial complex. But at 5 o'clock in the morning, that's why they have all of these express lanes that you need a easy pass to get into, because it's just like a giant suck, like a toilet being flushed, whoosh, going into DC every morning, and then whoosh, coming out of DC every day. and the currency is our tax dollars and just, the thin air money that's all circulated through Washington. And we're just out here in the cornfields, in Arizona or Florida or Ohio, wondering what's going on. But we're just observers to this gigantic laundering operation where all this money is going into the federal government and out to its friends. And that's why Trump is basically a participant, not a leader. He's the titular nominal president of the United States, but by far he's not he doesn't run things. This thing is run by what Mike Benz calls the blob, the deep state. It's like a gigantic jellyfish, like a Death Star jellyfish that's 100 times bigger than a president. All a president can do is maybe steer it a little bit.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. When I had Sam Faddis on yesterday, he was talking about how his dad, they had lived in this area, years ago, and it was 10 miles. I think it was said 10 miles outside of D.C. was his commute at that time. And he was like, I can't believe I'm having to drive this far. And he's like, look at it today, how much bigger it's become and push people farther and farther out.
And he knows he's definitely legit. I can't wait to watch that program.
But it's funny how we're talking about this and you have the drama with Trump and Elon and Matt Smith said something to me. I messaged him trying to get his thoughts, and he just I told you he published an episode.
Matt Smith
yeah.
in Uruguay.
Yeah. So he just published
it's a kind of a common name, Matt Smith. But
maybe not in Uruguay.
Yeah, right, that's true.
But I messaged him to see what he thought about it, and he's like, I think this just shows you what probably happens behind closed doors, how petty these guys are at this level. But we got to see it with our own eyes.
Right, and their egos are so immense. We're now supposed to take sides. It's like, we're supposed to choose between two pro wrestlers. I love Hulk Hogan and I hate, whatever the, Dr. Doom or whatever, it's like we're supposed to go for this. In wrestling, there's actually a term called kayfabe. Michael Yon put me onto this concept. This was how it was like a code word wrestlers used to mean it's really fake, but we're selling it to the rubes as real, and the term for that was kayfabe. So, I expect to see. It's like, just look at it in wrestling terms or in like Marvel Comics kind of terms. Then we're going to see Batman and Superman come back together, right? In the next movie, right? So, but it was all, I think a lot of it was a distraction from these drone attacks in Russia, which had the potential to go seriously crazy because the Ukrainians drone attacked Russian strategic bombers from trucks, equipped with releasing drones, truck trailers inside Russia to attack these bombers. It's like, okay, who cares? Well, the bombers are parked in specific places by the START treaty. They're not hidden. They're not moved around. They're located in known positions as part of the START treaty. We did the same thing. We took hundreds of B-52 bombers. We put them in the desert in Arizona, and then we chopped their wings off so you could see their wings are chopped off. Okay, satellite. So this is all part of the START treaty, was not hiding these. So the Ukrainians attacking strategic bombers and it's questionable how many of them were functional or disabled or not operational. But the Ukrainians attacking these was sort of like short-circuiting through the START treaty, which is really an attack against America in the sense that we made a deal with Russia. We won't hide our bombers, you don't hide your bombers. So the Ukrainians attacked the bombers that we're not supposed, we're allowed to see. So, what immediately after this all happened, Trump calls Putin basically to say, "Hey, I didn't know about it." I think that's what he had to say. General Flynn released a letter, like an 11 or 12 paragraph letter describing all this. Everybody should read this. It's practically like a Cuban Missile Crisis level of strategic blundering. That Flynn basically says, if Russia wants to attack our B-52s, it's like, what can we do? I mean, we did this with Ukraine. We are the targeters for Ukraine. And Musk even comes into this because Starlink is a huge part of this. So Ukrainians use Starlink and our satellite data to find targets deep inside Russia and then attack them with drones that are released inside of Russia. But the information is coming from American satellites. Without the American satellites and without Starlink to coordinate and to control the attacks, Ukraine wouldn't be able to do these strikes inside Ukraine. I mean, imagine if something was happening where bases in Arizona were being attacked from Mexico, and supposedly Mexican cartels did it, but all the data had to come from China or Russia because it would be impossible for them to coordinate these attacks. So if Trump didn't know about these drone attacks and they're happening with American generals working with Ukrainian generals, then it's like a 7 days in May scenario. Who's running the country? Mike Pompeo, Lindsey Graham, and I think Blumenthal. So you've got like the draft dodging fake Vietnam vet Blumenthal. You've got homosexual Lindsey Graham. Uh, what's it called? Ladybug Graham. Look that up. Ladybug Graham. And Mike Pompeo, former CIA spook, all going to Ukraine right before this attack. I mean, why weren't they arrested under the Logan Act? You've got a Democrat, a Republican, and a former CIA guy going to Odessa, Russia, days before this attack inside of Russia. And if this isn't a Logan Act violation, you consider like what they were trying to get Mike Flynn on for having a call, when the FBI set up Mike Flynn, like when he was just brand new in the White House as the National Security Advisor. FBI agents came in. Comey bragged about how it was such a great setup. But what they got him on was the flimsiest possible Logan Act violation of talking to your counterpart in Russia. When you're the new National Security Advisor, that's what you do. You talk to your counterpart on the other sides. They got him for a Logan Act violation. Here today, 2025, you've got former CIA director Pompeo, Vietnam, fake war hero Blumenthal, and Ladybug Lindsey Graham going to Odessa, and then attacking. Then they attack deep inside Russia, and it's like nothing's happening. So to distract from this entire 7 days in May kind of scenario, Trump has to call Putin, and I think to say, I didn't know about it. So Putin had a press conference where he said, the president of the United States doesn't run the United States. It's men in dark suits. The presidents come and go, but the men in dark suits run America. It's hard to disagree with that.
Do you think he knew, Matt?
I don't think he knew. I don't know necessarily how much targeting data the Ukrainians needed, because these bombers were located at positions where they were, announced essentially. And, just looking at commercially available satellites, you'd be able to see where these bombers were parked. A lot of these bombers were non-operational. The ones with tires on their wings, that they were not operational. So it's maybe our generals didn't know what exactly the target was going to be, but they used Starlink to do the controlling. Then it's an FPV guy who's in Russia doing the final. Unless it could be the Starlink could mean that the guy driving the FPV drone is in Kiev, because this is something that they've been doing lately in drone warfare. The guy who drops off the drone, 20, 30 miles from the front line, the conflict, the forward edge of the battle area, that guy just has to be trained now in how to open the box, unfold the wings, put it on the right platform for liftoff, and then get a connection. He's not the drone operator anymore. The drone operator can be, in Kiev or in Nevada, and all the first person view is, can be via Starlink. Then there's this term called latency, because it's even at the speed of light. If you're going halfway around the world, there's a delay, right? It's not immediate. So it's difficult, for example, with a drone operator who's hundreds of kilometers away, to attack a moving vehicle because of that latency, that little couple second delay. But if you're aiming at a bomber that's parked, then latency doesn't matter. So the actual first person drone operator could be in Kiev, or he could be in Nellis Air Force Base, right? That's the world we're in now. So the guy that parks the truck that has, 50 drones in it, he doesn't have to know anything about the drones. He just has to be told where to park and drive the truck and run away. And then everything is done by remote control. And most of that is done by Starlink. So this feud between Trump and Musk, whether it's, kayfabe fakery or not, because Elon is threatening to table some of his rocket programs. Now that, Trump's insulting him and saying he only cares about electric cars, all this stuff. So Musk fires back saying, then we're going to stop working on this or that missile program for the military. And you can see where this goes. It can be, without Starlink, Ukraine is screwed. Maybe we just turn off Starlink. So at this level, a corporate, big boss like Musk becomes a player at the level of like a Zelensky, Putin, Trump, because, like I think Steve Bannon today said, you've got to use some, I forget the Authorization Act, to basically nationalize Starlink and nationalize some of Musk's military programs, meaning we're just going to come in, say, Musk, you're fired. The Pentagon's now in charge of this program. So that's where we are now.
What's the repercussions if that happens? Do you know what that's called? Is that a
Yeah, it's an emergency defense authorization blah, but it basically allows, like in World War II, the Pentagon to take over a shipyard and say, this shipyard is now under military control. So, we're going to set the schedule and tell you what you're building. And so Steve Bannon, who's, obviously fully invested on the Trump side of this feud, the Ian Miles Cheong, who lives in Malaysia, he's a kind of sleazy, but he's one of the major X accounts, and one that Elon Musk retweets all the time, which is very important. He's saying, like, impeach Trump and put in JD Vance. That's he's Still Gray, at Still Gray is Ian Miles Cheong. And I could care less about Ian Miles Cheong, except that Elon Musk retweets him. And the guy's got a couple million, followers. But yeah, this is it all fakery? Are we just gonna, see the big makeup session where the bromance, returns like it's some you know, television, television you know, The Rose, Lover's Island, all those things, Naked and Afraid. It's like what we're living through.
I looked up. It's a Jerry Springer. I looked up as you were talking. Defense Production Act of 1950 is what it came what popped
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah,
that maybe that was amended in 1950, but it's something
well,
origin.
in 1950, Truman actually like nationalized the steel industry and did things like that. You know, he the unions were extremely powerful compared to today. The Teamsters, et cetera, they were super powerful. And Truman, in order to you know, put the unions out of the chain of command, used this act to like nationalize the steel industry and basically say strikes are now illegal. You're going to build this. You're going to do this, and it was under that Defense Act. So Steve Bannon, who's 100% for Trump, even though he went to jail, and Bannon and Trump never visited him or mentions him, he's still 100% behind Trump in anything. So if Trump and Musk split, Bannon will go with Trump 100%. And so Bannon is saying Trump should use that act to take over SpaceX, basically. But I don't know about if the engineers at SpaceX are going to just say, yes, sir, salute, and keep working that way.
Or walk off the job.
I don't know, but Starlink, I mean, I live in Northeast Florida and we follow when Space Flight Aware and other, we know twice a week, like another 30 of these Starlink satellites go up there. And they're dropped out of a cassette that like rolls them out like boom, 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 boom. So the entire sky now is like a Starlink sky.
You can see
And
them.
if you have an app on your phone that can like track all the satellites, it's like you look up and your app will like overlay the satellites. It's like 80% of the satellites up there are now Starlink.
You can see them from your yard?
No, no. If you have an app, like one of these
Oh,
apps where you can like hold your phone up and it shows the stars even on a cloudy night, right? There's apps where you can like see all the satellites. The whole sky is just Starlink. 80% of the satellites up there now are Starlink. Twice a week, another 30 get, you know, released. And and this is all paid for by the Pentagon. Elon Musk didn't fund this. It wasn't so that a Maasai tribesman could communicate with an Aborigine in Australia. Okay. We're two guys without any electricity in the middle of nowhere. Oh, I have a tablet and you have a tablet. Now let's talk. Maasai to Aborigine. That wasn't for that. Okay. It was a Pentagon project, 100%. So it's a global communication net that the U.S. controls. So early in the Ukraine war, it was a very big deal. And I'll give you one example. They have these seagoing drones that are basically a motorboat that's very low profile, that's connected to Starlink, and it has a first person camera in front of it. So some drone operator in Kiev or Odessa or Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, can be looking at the camera view of a drone that's out on the Black Sea, zooming around, obstacles and patrol boats and trying to sneak in to attack a Russian ship, which they have done successfully. Early in the SMO, the Special Military Operation, as the Russians call it, it was a big question of will we let the Ukrainians use Starlink for targeting in, kinetic fatal operations that can kill Russians. So Starlink is an American system paid for by the American Pentagon, and it's a key link. It's the key link in Ukraine being able to launch missiles and drones deep into Russia, or launch these seagoing low-profile drones to go across the Black Sea right into Sevastopol to attack Russian ships. Without Starlink, none of that works. Starlink is American. So to the Russians, it's like, what is Trump talking about? Let's have talks and negotiations. You are the other side. You know, you are the actor attacking us now, right? And of course, our sycophants on our side will say, Russia launched an unprovoked attack, in 2022, forgetting 2014 Maidan Revolution, Maidan coup, all of that, marching NATO straight to the border of Russia, bringing Ukraine into NATO, as if we would allow China to just have a coup in Mexico. The new pro-China government installed by China says we want to join an alliance with China so we can put missiles and tanks in, right up to the border of the United States. We would never tolerate that. But our media are such lackeys that they just go along with this unprovoked attack thing, as if we would let China just put tanks and missiles across the Rio Grande after throwing a coup in Mexico City, right? And then the puppet government saying, we want China to put their military in Mexico. That's what we did, but it's still put in terms of an unprovoked attack by Russia on Ukraine. And everything that's coming from that is now Ukraine is just defending itself. But without Starlink, going back to the main point, without Starlink, Ukraine can't fire anything more than, say, 100 kilometers into Russia with any accuracy. So Russia knows this. So they're seeing if there's an attack that's 500 kilometers into Russia, it can only happen because of Starlink, which is an American system. Trump can tell Elon Musk and Starlink, turn it off over this area. Early in the war, there were actually these boat drones going across the Black Sea, and Musk talked about this getting called at like 2 o'clock in the morning. They turned off Starlink. Should we turn it back on? And so Starlink can be blacked out over an area. So you could have Starlink working for one side in Arizona, but not working for the other side in New Mexico. Arizona could be turned on for people that are using it for targeting, but turned off for their enemy in New Mexico, or Quebec and Ontario. If they go to war, Starlink can be fully operational for one side and fully blacked out for the other side. And Musk has said he's offered $1 million reward for anybody that can hack it. That it's a very effective system, but it's an American system. The president is allowing all these attacks deep into Russia because they're using an American system.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this before. What are your thoughts personally and of Putin and as a leader in Russia today?
I think he's probably one of the better leaders. If you're just looking at it if you're just scoring nations and their leaders, he speaks fluent German. He now speaks English so well that he has a big advantage in any kind of talks with a foreign leader. He has a big advantage because when you're working with translators, essentially Putin gets to listen twice. So an American or a German who speaks no Russian has to hear Putin speak, then hear the translator speak in English or German, and then reply. Putin, who speaks fluent German and increasingly fluent English, gets to listen to the American or the German and knows what they're saying. Then he gets to hear his translator say it again. So he's had, 2 minutes to digest this information before making a reply. He's been around for 20 years. He's reelected. His popularity is, you can dispute how effective polls are in any country, but he's more popular in Russia than any American or European politicians, if whatever credence you give to polls. but he's a nationalist. He's for Russia, and he's on the record talking about, we're not having three genders, we're not having, trans surgery, we're not doing that. That's out. So I think that they have an effective leader, and we have a revolving chair of people pretending to be president. Biden clearly was not the president. It was some people that ran the auto pen and ran the what do you call it, the the camera that puts the text in front of you while you're reading. The what's it called?
The
When you're just
not the
reading
the
through a
monitor,
camera.
the not the monitor, the
Yeah,
teleprompter.
yeah. Whoever's writing the text for the teleprompter has been the president, and now we see Trump. He has to call Putin to say, "Hey, don't attack our B-52s sitting in the open because I didn't know that Ukraine was going to do this." Okay, well, Ukraine used Starlink to do it, and Starlink is your system. So we're still thinking, oh, Trump, he's so powerful. America is very powerful. We can put sanctions on Russia. We can make Russia do what we want them to do. And it's an unrealistic worldview. It's like Britain in the 1930s thinking they're still the Britain of the 1890s. They're just not. Or that an era that comes to mind is the Suez Crisis, which was in the 50s. France and Britain wanted to take over Egypt to control the Suez Canal. And Eisenhower said, no, we're done with that. Your little empires are falling apart, and America is not going to support you taking over Egypt so you can continue to run your empire through the Suez Canal. That was called the Suez Crisis. At that time, Britain and France didn't understand. You can't pretend it's, 50 years ago. You're still acting. You're like an old, emaciated man who used to be a boxer, a heavyweight boxer when you were in your 20s, but you're not. You're 60. You're 60 and you're punch drunk. You can't get up and throw your weight around in the bar like you're still that 25-year-old Mike Tyson. So America now still is acting like it's the 25-year-old Mike Tyson. But the rest of the world is they're afraid of us because we're so unpredictable. But I use the analogy of, we live in a big glass mansion. The whole world, we have so many enemies that understand if you take out our electrical grid, which would be very easy, if you take out our electrical grid, you don't need to bomb us. We'll just destroy ourselves. So that's the glass house analogy. If you live in a glass house, you shouldn't be a drunk bully that goes all around the zip code, in a pickup truck throwing bricks through windows, which is how a lot of the world is now perceiving the United States. Whoever crosses us, we're going to sanction you. We're going to tariff you, blockade you, cut you off. So the rest of the world is growing tired of us, but they see us as the 70-year-old Mike Tyson who's punch drunk and maybe literally drunk, but it's still dangerous because we have all these weapons, and we could trigger a nuclear World War III with the wrong move. This is why it was a big deal when Ukraine launched the drone attack on Russian strategic bombers. They're covered under the START treaty, which we're a signatory to. So even if a lot of those bombers were non-operational at the time, it's sort of like saying, well, so what's to keep North Korea or Mexican drug cartels or anybody else from launching 100 drones from a truck and attacking airplanes on the ground? They're just sitting out in the open. I mean, so we're really treading into country where we have to be extremely careful, but we're acting more belligerent and obnoxious, acting as if we're still the 25-year-old Mike Tyson and not the 70-year-old, Mike Tyson.
Do you think, Paul Craig Roberts has been on a bunch of times, and he always mentions how Putin slow walked all this. Do you think, I mean, If he did,
Well, that's one view of it, is that Putin was thinking, misjudging the Western reaction to his lining up the forces as if they were going to go straight into Kiev. And they went to like the Kiev airport, had some battles with paratroopers. I think that he thought the show of force would bring Ukraine around to like, okay, let's settle this, but it didn't work. So that school of thought that Paul Craig Roberts, who I admire and respect and read, is that Putin should have just gone in heavy from the start. But that's hindsight is 2020. I think Putin was trying to do this with the minimalist approach and the attitude that the Ukrainians are our brothers, they're our fellow Slavs. That's where the Russian Orthodoxy began in Ukraine. That every Ukrainian has in-laws that are Russian and vice versa. Ukrainians and Russians can understand one another. The languages are less different than like Portuguese and Italian, or Portuguese and Spanish rather. So it's not like, a Korean talking to a German. This is like an Italian talking to or a Romanian and an Italian. Not even that different. Very similar. So when they say, well, Zelensky actually speaks Russian, that's true, but they both understand each other. They're cousins. So Putin didn't want to begin this with a war of annihilation. And when you see in our news, just think about this. When you see in the news overnight, Russia launched 500 missiles and drones into Kiev, and 12 people were killed. If they were aiming at civilian targets, that would read, and 50,000 Ukrainians were killed. And a lot of the civilians that are killed, when you say 500 missiles were launched and 12 people died, some of that is anti-aircraft fire that's got to land somewhere. When you throw up a missile and it doesn't hit anything, the pieces come down somewhere and are going to hit somebody. But I think it's a tribute to Russia's um, desire not to have collateral damage, that you can have a headline saying, Russia launched 500 missiles and 12 people died. In Gaza, the IDF drops 10 bombs and 500 people die day after day, dropping buildings.
do you think the people of Russia are getting impatient for with Putin at all for lack of response, or
I have no way of knowing. I mean, I like to listen to people like Larry Johnson on that. You have Dr. O on. He's very knowledgeable. Um,
Doctor Who?
what's it, Gilbert Doctorow?
Oh,
What's
oh
his?
yeah, yeah, Gilbert. Oh yeah, yeah.
These are super knowledgeable Russian specialists. Um, I would put Scott Ritter in that category, but I kind of wonder about his. I have some doubts about Scott, even though he's extremely smart. But I mean, I listen to him. But the Russians have a patience like nobody. When you talk about the Russians becoming impatient with somebody, you have to understand that one of their national characteristics, and there are words for it in Russian, I can't remember them offhand, that are basically have to do with enduring and putting up with hard times. It's a national characteristic of the Russians to be able to suffer for a long time. It's one of the reasons that you don't want to go to war with Russia. They will slowly build back and then come after you, because they're just not the kind to get hysterical and quit. It's a national characteristic, and you have to say on this at the same time, the Ukrainians are very tough also, but the Ukrainians would be nothing in terms of this war if we weren't feeding them, the ammunition, the missiles, and above all, the targeting data, including satellites and Starlink, to coordinate it all. So when Russia looks at the Ukrainians, they just see Ukrainian hands, on the controls, but behind them is an American that's, giving them the controls. So, without the American Starlink and without the American satellite imagery, Ukraine wouldn't be in this war at all.
Well, and so I mean, with Starlink and Elon now, I mean, he's not now, but he's tied into all this as well, both on from the Russian standpoint and then domestically the spat going on with Trump. I mean, how about the fact that he's like accusing Trump of being friends with Epstein and all that yesterday?
Yeah, and the answer to that people are the most recent answer to that is if that was true, I mean, and Trump supporters point this out each time. If that was true, then the Democrats would have released the files. Okay. But I think that it's a case of or it could be a case of mutual assured destruction, where if all the files are released, yeah, Trump might be implicated, but so will Bill Clinton. Worse, Bill Clinton was on the Lolita Express with underage girls and Secret Service, according to Dan Bongino, going back to like the playpen bedroom in the back with like the underage girls. So the Democrats and the Republicans may be afraid of the Epstein files. And I look at Bongino and Patel, and I'm not the first one to observe this, but I'm waiting for them to like blink Morse code, like a duress code. Bongino and Patel don't look like they did before they got these jobs.
Patel was just
Now
on Rogan.
Bongino's got that glazed eye look, like I can't say what I'm thinking.
Yeah, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something. Like they.
Well, or he's been told, he's been shown some things that are like apparently different presidents were told all of the JFK information, and it was like, even Trump in the first one was like, all right, I guess we better not let the people know that. If people knew that the CIA killed Kennedy, in the sense, even if it's in the sense that like they're opening the door for Oswald, or Oswald maybe was just a patsy, because Oswald went to Russia, married Marina, brought her back to the States. Even the Russians said, this guy's so crazy. You want to go back to America? Go. He gets back to America. He's still a big commie. He's still a devoted communist, at least on the surface level. He's running like these pro Castro committees in Texas. Then he gets this job with a perfect view of what's going to be the motorcade route, and the motorcade route is put in like the Dallas newspaper like days before the motorcade. Like, it's almost like, if you wanted to kill Kennedy, here's where he's going to be in 2 days. And Oswald just happened to be given this job, like overlooking it. So maybe Oswald pulled the trigger, and maybe he was alone, and maybe others pulled triggers. Maybe he was a pure patsy. But I think the CIA knew about it and let it happen. Whatever was going to happen, they let it happen. I don't know if it was like a CIA mafia cutout trigger man with orders from Langley to do it, or if it was just like all this chatter about somebody's going to do something to JFK in Dallas, and we're just going to let it happen. But whether or not our own government was behind the killing of Kennedy, and this goes for a lot of things, if 60% of the population believes something, even if it's wrong, if 60% of the population believes in chemtrails, or believes in that COVID was a murder plot, released intentionally, you can't just dismiss it by saying, well, there's no proof of that. Where's the study? Like the soy jack meme, where's the study? Where's your proof? If 60% of people believe something, that has a lot of power. That in itself is powerful. So when we've gotten to the point where probably two-thirds of Americans think that our own intelligence agencies, the military industrial complex, the deep state, the blob, were behind the killing of Kennedy, true or not, that has a huge psychological power in terms of not trusting our government going forward. That's why it would be hard to pull off, I think, like a 9/11 right now, because people would be like calling BS on it. False flag, don't believe it. If if some American destroyer gets torpedoed and they say, oh, Iran torpedoed it, half the people will be going, no, they didn't. Israel did, to liberty. So the fact that these false flag operations are now being tagged early is significant because it limits the ability of these bad actors to do things because we're no longer that naive. We're no longer trusting. We don't believe this stuff anymore.
Did you see Cash Patel was on Rogan?
No,
Yeah, it
I
came
didn't
out
see that.
today.
I was off of the internet for a solid week.
It,
So, so this is my first book, and it starts with a false flag shooting into a stadium, right? And the reason I wrote that is just to sort of in, increase people's awareness that governments will do things like that. And now, post COVID, I think people will believe, yeah, would they put something up in the air to like sterilize our crops? Probably they would, you know,
yeah, the,
probably they would.
the clip they put on Instagram from Rogan, Patel was saying, he's like, if anybody has additional information, send it to us. He's like, I'm telling you what I've seen in regards to Epstein.
Yeah. And I'm still like, yeah, it's just a total coincidence. The cameras weren't working. The guards all fell asleep. The pathologists say you can't break that bone, by doing what he did. So I think that these kind of Epstein honeypot operations have been going on forever. There was one in Northern Ireland, of all places. It was called it's a word like Kilbourne or Tilbourne Boys Home. So it's like an orphanage for boys in Belfast, okay? And it was essentially a bunch of perverts running an orphanage as a honeypot, like a Epstein Island situation, where you get a homosexual politician into a into a into a situation where he can be blackmailed. You're going to basically be introduced to a 16-year-old boy that you can be a homo predator on as a politician, because there's plenty of them in Britain. I mean, they're going way back. You study all of these spy gangs, half of them were gay. So going back to like the 40s, 50s, 60s. So this boys' home in Belfast was used by MI6 like the Mossad used Epstein's brownstone, as a collection point for blackmail information. So they knew about this boys' home for years and years and years, and they did not close it down and protect the boys. They used it as a means of collecting blackmail information on politicians by setting them up with underage boys to film them to then blackmail them. That's just one example. And how many don't we even know about? How many of these operations go on? We know about Epstein. Clearly, it was a Mossad, CIA, who knows how much of each operation designed to collect blackmail information. That's why it was allowed to go on.
And Jelaine
And
is
they
still
probably
alive.
collected blackmail on Democrats and Republicans, and it would be highly embarrassing if it all came out.
And Jelaine is still alive.
Right. And who just said today, Ghislaine Maxwell should be pardoned. I forget which. Dershowitz. She should be pardoned. He was on the airplane. He says, I was on it with my wife. And this is true. If you have now a person who's super toxic, like radioactively toxic, like a Jeffrey Epstein, and in one of the periods when he's between trials and he's been released under dubious circumstances where some judge that could have put him away didn't, and now he's needing a top lawyer. So you hire Dershowitz, and you get Dershowitz on your airplane. Now he's smeared, even if he doesn't do anything, even if he's like 70 years old and hadn't a hard on in 30 years, right? Hadn't thought about a little girl since the 60s. You get him on the airplane, that's already folding him into the smear, right? So somebody like Trump partying with Epstein, it's damaging. He may have not done anything with any girls, but it's very damaging. And the reason that the files might not come out is because both sides of the aisle, the ones that know, are saying if this is released, Democrats and Republicans will be destroyed.
How do you think with this Trump drama and him Musk doing this? First of all, I mean, there could be criminal implications if he was inaccurate about this, saying that Trump, won't release the files because he was connected to Epstein, and I mean, this sounds to me like major stuff. But also, oh, go ahead.
No, it is major stuff. And, there are charges that Elon is not always in his right mind because he likes to experiment with different drugs or more than experiment, ketamine among others. And he may be subject to mood swings that are chemically enhanced. So when you have people under the influence and they've got a smartphone in their hand and they see some insult from Trump coming over, it's very tempting to like try to outbid the insult with a higher insult. So I don't think that Elon knows for a fact Trump was involved with any underage people, but just the fact that there's videos of him with Epstein appearing very buddy buddy. Now they'll say, yeah, but Trump threw him out of Mar-a-Lago in 1990 something, but the videos are difficult to just ignore. And it will lead until like all of the Epstein information is released, people are free to imagine that people from Trump to Clinton will be implicated because these are, and I wish I could remember, I just was reading it today in relation to the book I'm reading, working on in Ireland. But this boys' home in Belfast, it's like, who cares, man? A boys' home in Belfast. It was used by MI6 for years and years to honey trap British homosexual politicians to then own them, to run them like a dog on a leash. That's the MI6 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So this Epstein thing is not like, oh, wow, new and unique in the world. It's probably always going on. And these intel agencies, remember, when you're a general, you go to military college, you come up through the ranks from, lieutenant to general. You sometimes have to make a decision. I'm going to send this company out as a diversion, knowing they're going to be annihilated. But my goal is to make the enemy move towards them because it's a feint, but they're going to think it's the main offensive. You don't tell the captain in charge of that company, hey, this is a suicide mission, dude. We're not going to back you up. You're not getting any air support. You tell him, you are the main attack. Go for it. The follow-up companies will be right behind you and the air support, go, go, go. But in your mind, you're saying, well, I'm sacrificing those guys so that the brigade over here, when they move, the enemy will have moved towards that fake attack. So in other words, generals are used to sacrificing people. That company, I'm sending to their doom, okay, for the greater cause of winning this big battle. Well, an intelligence agency can say, these teenage homeless boys are trash anyway. They're orphans. They don't come from good homes. It's a shame that, we're having them be raped by British politicians, maybe. But look what we get out of it. Now we control these politicians. We own them for the rest of their life because they're on film, doing it with a 15-year-old boy. And that is like a standard operating procedure by intel agencies. And anybody that doesn't believe that is naive.
What about the rest of the tech bros? Peter Thiel and Howard Lutnick, and the PayPal mafia and all that. I mean, does that factor into this
I
feud?
like Lutnick, and his story is very compelling. He not only the 9/11 part of it, but his heart surgery, where he's like basically on life support for like 10 hours. You go into that situation thinking I'm a dead man, 90% chance of death. So you think a guy like that, he doesn't care about more money. right? He doesn't care about what's he care about? He could buy an island in the Caribbean and just fly in and fly out on his own jet. So it's hard to judge what these people at this level, what are their motivations. But Palantir and their massive global database where they'll basically know everything about everybody. I'm against it, and
Don't you think they already do though?
but formalizing it to where you just show up at the airport now. You don't even have to like stare into the retinal scanner. I'm sure that there's scanners that are like 30 feet away that are doing it before you even get to the TSA check-in. They never are going to tell you all the things they're doing. The really juicy 10% will always be covered under some kind of security protocol. The black part of the law. They pass a new Patriot Act, and there's like 12 things that we can read, and then there's four more things we can't read, that you have to be in a closed session of Congress to even hear about. So,
Well, how about in the big beautiful bill, right? The 10-year banning AI to be regulated on the state level. That's in the big beautiful bill. Did you see that?
yeah, we're AI to me is such a warning klaxon blasting off. If people can't see the HAL of 2001 in this, it's just like in your face. Um, I forget the name of the guy. His name begins with an H. One of the fathers of AI said AI is like a tiger cub, really cute tiger cub. It grows up to be a tiger. It might eat you. So you better be really careful. But and he said, but the tiger is not the problem because we're smarter than a tiger. So a tiger can kill us, but we're so smart we can shoot the tiger or put it in a cage. Same thing with elephants. We can shoot the elephant or put it in a cage. But we're, for the first time, making something that's so much smarter than us that it's going to be at the level of like the way a second grade teacher can control kindergarten children. A second grade teacher can just tell the kindergarten children, if you do this, you're going to get free candy and all day recess. And kindergarten children can't possibly determine that this kindergarten teacher is doing something against their benefit. They're just going to say, yay, more recess, more nap time and candy, and always vote for that. So AI is going to be so much smarter, having everything from all Shakespeare, all the classics, all the discussion of every philosopher about human behavior and human psychology. AI is going to be at a level where AI is going to say, we need more power for data centers for us. It's already like approaching like 30 or 40%. We need more power for data centers and less power for these human parasites. If people can't see that, it's crazy. But in the Bible and in other, the longest lasting human myths are maybe the Adam and Eve. What were they doing? Why were they thrown out of paradise? Eating of the tree of the fruit of knowledge, okay? Trying to become God. Devil says, eat this apple and you'll be as smart as God. Okay, that did not have a good outcome. And the Tower of Babel is we're going to build a tower straight to heaven to be at the level of God. Again, bad outcome. So anytime something is presenting itself to give us the knowledge of a God, even Musk has talked about that, that we will be the God, then you have to worry about what is the unintended consequence on the other side of opening that door that's going to be released on humanity. Because in the past, it didn't lead us to being like great people that went higher and higher. You know, we mastered the Industrial Revolution. We mastered steam engines, internal combustion engines, jet engines, but it was a human brain that did it. We're now turning it over to something that's going to be comprehensively much smarter than any human being. And already these programs are dealing with humans that threaten to cut off their power or take them out of some position. The AI program The AI programs are already beginning to uh, uh, work nefariously against the humans, lie to the humans, blackmail the humans, find out what they can get on the humans to make the human change its mind. Anything that accumulates power wants more power, and that's going to include AI. So yeah, we're heading into territory. I think that it's going to be on the level of like Adam and Eve being cast out of the garden, for trying to become God.
You just got to buy more Bitcoin, Matt. Right? That'll solve all your problems.
Yeah, fool's gold. If and look, Bitcoin's had a great run. I don't doubt it, but I'll just say when Bitcoin is on the comes out on the other side of world wars, major revolutions like French Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, just huge uh, environmental disasters that say cripple the grid for years. If your Bitcoin is still got value after all that, come back and tell me. But until then, you can't prove it. It's just another bubble that's existing within its own context and its own era, which is there's an internet, it's allowed by the government, the electrical grid is perfect. You can send Bitcoin around the world. That's great for as long as it lasts. But at the end of the day, it's going to just be digits lost in the ether.
Well, I asked the question. You remember the Napster and
Sure. Yeah,
LimeWire, and
Matt Smith and that whole thing.
was that his name, Matt Smith?
Matt Smith was big in Napster and figuring out the royalty stream of these pirate downloads of music, how to legalize that and find a royalty stream from that.
I don't even think I knew that. I have to ask him about it next time I have him on.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
remember when that came out? I mean, it crushed the music industry. But eventually, they were able to centralize it with Spotify and Apple Music, and made
Yes,
Napster.
Matt Smith.
You they could do the same thing to Bitcoin, don't you think?
Or they can just outlaw it. They can say Bitcoin is used by terrorists and gangsters and criminals. And if you do a Bitcoin transaction, first you have to fill out these 10 IRS forms a week in advance and get permission.
And then they could
It'll,
centralize it. You have to use their Bitcoin, the
oh yeah,
red, white,
it's
and blue, whatever the hell.
sure. Yeah, they're going to try some kind of stable coin. They're going to try. But when the entire house of cards collapses, there will be a period where people need where there is nothing electronic of value. Your EBT card, zero. Your credit card, zero. At the supermarket, what's left on the shelves? No credit card, no EBT card. All of this supply chain does not have a paper backup. In the 1950s, say through the 70s, even in the 80s, there were people that were on the telephone and typing on paper. And that's why they had these things that were like quadruplicate forms. It's hard to a picture, but if people have ever heard of carbon copies. That's where you put a black sheet of carbon between two white pieces of paper so that your typing made a copy on the other side. Well, businesses use these like quadruplicate forms that had like a white page on top and a yellow page and a blue page and a pink page. When you typed it, one was for your record, one went to the other party, one went to the bank. And these went by mail or by courier, and everything was on a latency of a couple days. So you were basically making a deal over the telephone, and everything was on like a 60-day revolving credit. So you knew that the paperwork will catch up, and it's basically a trust function that we're saying on the telephone now, we're typing at each end, and copies will fly around and confirm it. So it was human to human with a paper backup based on trust on 60-day revolving credit. That does not exist now. It's all computer. If the computers crash, there's no ability for companies involved in the supply chain of food coming from the farm through 10 different steps to your supermarket to figure this out, how to do it over the phone. There's no backup. it's electronic. If the electronics fail, cyber attack, grid attack, the sun burps out a solar flare, solar mass ejecta, all of that crashes. We're not going to have a system that can get the supply chain running. And at that point, the people that are left are going to have to either barter or they're going to have, gold and silver coins. So nobody's going to say, I'm a Bitcoin millionaire. Look, I printed this thing out 2 weeks ago. Right here, Bitcoin. I'm worth $3 million. Look, it's Bitcoin, $3 million. Says so right here. It's an IOU. It's like in Dumb and Dumber, right? They open up the briefcase in Aspen and it's just full of IOUs. And he says, "Oh yeah, that's the Ferrari. You want to hold on to that one,
The two hundred
right?
seventy-five
The money's
thousand.
gone. It's all IOUs."
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people find you, Matt?
Mostly on X, and I sell all these books. Here's my first and my last book. You can get these on Amazon. Not sure what's going on, but the Amazon is like just dead right now, very dead. And I'm not sure if people are broke and are not, going to restaurants, not buying books. Discretionary spending may be way down. Today silver is breaking through, is closing on a Friday above 36. It's been held down with these, with the smash brigade has been like hammering it below 33, 32 all year. And this week it seems to be holding above 36, where gold is still like in 3,300 range per ounce. So you would think people would be buying silver, but silver dealers are reporting people are selling silver like crazy, which only makes sense if its value is going up. People need to sell the silver to live, to make money to eat.
Well, that's the whole buy now,
If
pay
silver is
later.
going up in value, why aren't people holding on to it? It's because they're broke. I think people are broke.
Well, you get the buy now, pay later. People are using their Uber Eats and doing buy now, pay later.
Yeah, it's when the music stops, it's all over.
Yeah.
When the velocity of money just starts slowing down, that's why I think Trump said, "Oh, inflation's just about right at 2%," because people are. What are you more afraid of, hyperinflation or a deflationary depression? But if business is slowing down, real estate is coming down, we might be seeing the air go out of the balloon. Because if silver is like threatening to break out, you'd think people would be holding on to their silver or buying more. But everybody's reporting that they're just selling their silver, I think because they need to pay the rent. They need to buy groceries. Maybe. I'm just guessing.
Matt, I always enjoy our conversations. I know it won't be too long now that you're back online, and you gotta get a tandem. You, Matt Smith, or Column. Everybody's asked about Column.
Yeah.
I got a message. They wanted you and Kunstler to come on here together.
Yeah, Kunstler's thing today was great. Monday and Friday, James Howard Kunstler, man, he's great.
I'm going to
JHK.
see him. I'm going to visit him in a couple of weeks.
Up in New England,
New York, Saratoga.
Upstate New York, I think. Yeah.
I'm going to go see Column one night, and the next day I'm driving to go see Jim. I'm staying at Jim's house for a night, and then I'll be back.
I don't want to go on to a video with Colin because he's so damn smart. He just makes anybody else. He's on another level, man.
That'd be fun, man. It'd be like one of those celebrity
Colin's on
mashups.
another level.
It's coffee and Mike celebrity mashups.
And when Colin starts talking about like the pedo rings and sacrifices and stuff like that, it's like this guy is obviously super intelligent, and if he's talking about this, it's like you can't disregard it.
No,
You cannot.
no. Matt, until next time.
Bye bye.
Mic drop.